Today we're going to take a look at this Gamakay TK75v2 which is Hall Effects version 2 keyboard. So let's just open it up real quick. Here's the keyboard. We'll set that aside. See what other things are included. Looks like some extra brass screws. It's interesting. Here's the good old, very inexpensive keycap remover and switch remover. And we have a braided USB-A to USB-C cable. That's nice. I like braided cables. All right, let's look at the keyboard itself. It's got a nice heft to it, but it does have a plastic case. The whole case seems to be plastic. On the back, we have two-stage style feet. So you can have it a max angle here, or if you don't like that, you can flip out the smaller feet for less of an angle, or if you don't want one any more than, well, that fell out, any more than this, you just put them back. Now, this foot hid the little slot that holds the 2.4 gigahertz dongle. That's interesting. So you gotta be careful that you don't lose it. Let's see, on the back edge we have the USB-C port, which you can use to charge the internal battery or use it in wired mode. And then this is a large switch that lets you choose between Bluetooth, wired, and the 2.4 gigahertz dongle. I tend to like to use mine wired, so I don't have to worry about any latency or battery issues, but I'll test it in both in all three configurations just to see how well it does. This is a 75% size keyboard, so it doesn't have a number pad, but it does have one of my favorite features on keyboards, and that is a volume knob, which you can also press to mute. And you have this little row of keys for home and page up, page down, and then you have inverted T keypad here for arrows. I like the graphics. Then you got a little screen here. We'll take a look at that in a minute. And you can see the different colors of the keys. Let's pop one of these keycaps off real quick, and then I'll talk to you about that. So we've got, if I can get it out of the tool, here's the keycap. You can see that. So you can hot swap the keycaps. And let's take out one of these switches here. Here we go with the switch. And these are silent switches. You can't hear a thing. And we'll do a full test to see what these sound like in just a second. Now you will notice that these are north facing RGB switches. So there's the little LED right there at the top. We'll check out the RGB effects too. Coming right up. All right, let's hook it up to my MacBook Pro and check out this little screen and do a typing test. I've connected it to my MacBook Pro, which is right there on that little ledge, and I'm using a wired connection right now to charge up the battery in the keyboard. And once it's plugged in, you can see some neat effects right off the bat. You'll notice there's a little screen, and it is in military time. I'll have to see if there's a way to change that. I'm pretty sure you can customize what you see on this little display using the web-based software or desktop-based software. But look at this. Look at this RGB bar here next to this row of navigation keys. Now that's cool. I haven't seen that in a keyboard before. Kind of like it. And I'm sure there's ways to change what type of effects are happening here, which we'll look at in just a minute. But here we go. It is connected. And I am now going to give you a sound test and an RGB lighting demo. Now we can check out some of the lighting effects. First, this light bar, which I think is really pretty cool. Now, I wanted to explain that instead of like most keyboards where you use a function key plus another key to switch between different lighting effects, with the Gamakay keyboard, you have to use that little display that's built in. And you use that with the knob, as you can see that I'm doing. And you go into the light bar settings, and then you can switch between the different effects. Now, you don't really notice a lot of difference between the effects for that light bar, but switching them is kind of a pain because it defaults back to the main screen really quickly. And then the same goes for switching the actual keyboard backlighting effects. You can go into the settings, which isn't difficult, but when you're trying to choose between a bunch of different ones, it will time out and keep going back to the clock display. But I mean, it's not a big deal. But you can watch here as I show a bunch of the different effects. And some of them are pretty nice. I like that one. That one's neat. And there's some of the, gradient effects, which most keyboards have. You can see that I keep having to go back into the settings because they time out. See right there, it went back to the clock if you look at that little display, and I have to go back and find the keyboard lighting effects and go back in them, and then you could switch between the different ones. So yeah, it's cool. I'm not really a keyboard lighting aficionado, I guess the word I want to say, because I don't use my keyboard in the dark. So most of the time I just turn it off. Now I have been leaving the light bar turned on because I really like that. And here's a quick close-up that shows what it looks like to go between the different settings of the little display there. You can see there's the clock, and then I'm going to switch between different ones. There's a CPU power display, but it does not work with my MacBook. And then there's the different lighting effects. And you can also switch between things like the Mac and Windows settings, which is great because I didn't even know that was an option, but it is. And you can choose the language, etc. Now, it is possible to change the keyboard settings and create keyboard shortcuts and macros, and even change the display by creating like a little picture and things like that. Now, you do that through this web page called gearhub.top. But unfortunately, I've gotten it to work one time, and I wasn't recording at that time. And this is what you can see what it looks like. And it will say, if no device is found after a long time, please try refreshing the page. Well, it never does work. it did work once. Now, if I change it to English, you can see that it is kind of glitching out down here at the bottom. See that? And I don't know what's going. Oh, never mind. That's a different option. It just lets you test the keyboard. It doesn't let you actually change anything, unfortunately. It's just not working. I think it's because this is a new keyboard and they haven't gotten all the bugs worked out of this software for this particular keyboard. So unfortunately, I can't test that feature. Now, who's going to want this keyboard? Well, it doesn't cost a lot, so it's good for people that are on a budget, and it's great for gamers. Now, I'm not a gamer, so I can't attest to all the gaming features like the low latency. This keyboard has 8K ultra low latency. Yes, I'm reading that off of my screen right here because, you know, that's not something that I personally care about. All I care about is what it feels like to type on it, how I can connect it to my computer. It has tri-mode connectivity. You can connect it with a USB cable, so you don't have to worry about the battery. That's what I prefer. You can use Bluetooth or you can use the USB dongle. Now, if you don't like wires, and I completely understand that, and you'd rather do Bluetooth or the dongle, you're in for a nice surprise, and that's that the battery in this keyboard will let you use it in those modes for a really long time. If you're going to use it with a dongle, you get 2,600 hours, maximum hours of usage per charge. If you're more into Bluetooth, you get even more. You get 5,000 hours of usage. Now that is a lot. Now I haven't tested that because that's a lot of hours, right? That would take me weeks to test that. So I just use a cable, so I don't have to worry about the battery. Other selling points for this keyboard include that it has SOCD. What the heck is that? Now, the other selling point is for gamers that you can do things like adjust the polling of the keys and the travel distance, and that is done through that software. And like I said, I had issues with that. Now, I even tried to install the driver, but it didn't work. Now, again, I'm using a Mac, so a Windows user might get better results, and Gamakay is working on the driver, and it's not quite ready yet, so what I was trying to do probably just isn't available yet. But for me, to type on it, it feels comfortable. I like the layout. I like the knob. You know, I like knobs. I like the RGB lighting effects on this bar. The little display doesn't really do anything for me other than let me adjust the settings of the lights on the keyboard and the bar. And it lets me change between Mac and Windows versions. They do not give you Mac specific keys like the Option key and the Command key, so you're stuck with the Windows and the Alt key. Not a big deal. But, you know, it's nice. A lot of keyboard manufacturers do give you those extra keys if you're a Mac user, but oh well. So when it comes down to it, I like this keyboard quite a bit. I prefer a little bit of sound when I'm typing. That's why I like a mechanical keyboard. But if you have people around you that you don't want to bother with the clickety-clackety of the keyboards, the silent switches on this keyboard are fantastic. They feel good, and they're so quiet. So let me know, is this a keyboard that you would check out yourself? And let me know in the comments below, what is your all-time favorite mechanical keyboard? You know, what are you using now, or what do you wish you could use? And if you're interested in purchasing this specific keyboard for yourself, check in the description below. I'll have links. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. Either leave a comment below or give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I would appreciate it. And as always, I really do hope you have a great day.